What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we got the new SBS One Piece. SBS 112 is out. It's been translated by Pew Piece on Twitter. If you don't already follow Pew Piece, check them out. A lot of new One Piece stuff comes through that channel. Always good to have on the backlog. And then we're also going to talk about some other stuff. We talked about the latest One Piece episode and just some news in general for anime. So let's see what Oda's talking about in the SBS. As always, you can double check all of these on Pew Piece's page. Some of the ones I'll probably skip if they're not super important or relevant, or if I just don't find them super interesting. So if you want the full breakdown of the SBS, please be sure to check out Twitter. Link will be in the description below. So the first set of questions we're going to talk about have to deal with Scopper. And I'm going to say some of it is a little controversial because it's going to rile up a lot of fans when it comes to Scopper's place and power and just his overall role as, you know, the left hand of the Pirate King. But the first question is simple because it's about his name and where it comes from. Now, if you know Oda, he likes to pull a lot of names and themes of characters from real life characters. And so the question is wondering if his name was taken from Space Sheriff Gavan from an old show that he used to watch as a kid. And while Oda is aware of that reference, he's like, no, it's actually from a French actor named Jean Gabin. That's where the name came from. Not necessarily the look, I would imagine, because I think the side-by-side picture shows that it's not really the same likeness as opposed to some of the other characters. If you look like Kizaru, for example, or Neru, they have very similar traits to the people that they are modeled after. I think Gabon was solely a name model. Now, the next question is more interesting because it is a breakdown of the Roger Pirates. They are specifically asking for what Gabon's role is, but Oda kind of gives us the full breakdown of what everyone is. So obviously, Roger's the captain, self-explanatory. Rayleigh's the first mate, he's the right hand, he's the Dark King, also explanatory. Gabon is the navigator, which was relatively unexpected. I don't know if we had that information beforehand through like any kind of hint or anything, but Gabon's navigator, so technically he would be the Nami of the crew. And naturally, that kind of that flared up some debates because we were looking at Scopper as like Sanji's foil as far as like power and just role in the crew. And the fact that the third of the crew is the navigator, it kind of leads more into the trio being Luffy, Zoro, and Nami outside of Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji. And not to say monster trio, but like the OGs, the main three of the crew being those three. And honestly, I don't mind it. I still kind of consider Luffy, Zoro, and Nami the OG three, the main three of the crew, because that's like the crux, the core of the crew is those three. So I feel like it makes sense. I feel like it reflects perfectly on how Luffy's crew is. Some people might see it a little bit differently. And I mean, I'm here for the agenda. They have a tactical advisor, Moon Isaac Jr., which is kind of cool because I feel like as far as like tactics go, a lot of the crew kind of shares that role. Where like you see Nami and Robin and Frankie kind of having more of the tactics, the strategy coming from those kinds of characters, the intelligent characters, the more versed characters. So it's not just one person. We know that Crocus was the doctor. Don Quino is the helmsman. So that would be Jinbei's foil, but I never really care about the helmsman because I feel like, I don't know, I feel like it's an antiquated role, right? Like you have a navigator, you have people that can actually work on the ship. A helmsman, your sole purpose is to steer the ship. I mean, I get it, but it just feels like a less needed role. And speaking of less needed roles, they have a torturer. And it's like in parentheses interrogator, but they straight up just have a torturer on Roger's crew. That brings up a lot of questions because what was Roger doing on his crew that he needed a torturer, that he needed someone specifically in the field of torture? Like, what was he doing out there? How was he moving out there to where he had to pull information like that? That's crazy. But that is Millet Pine. They have a full-on scholar, which is Rowan. And I wonder if it's scholar like, I don't know if it's an Ohara scholar or like scholar just as in the most knowledgeable on the crew. But I wonder what his main goal was because it seemed like Roger didn't really have anyone that had like worldly knowledge. In fact, it seemed like he leaned on other people to kind of gain that knowledge. For example, he leaned on Odin to kind of gain some knowledge about, you know, poneglyphs. And I mean, that is a lost knowledge, so it makes sense that he would need Odin for that. But like as far as being worldly, it didn't seem like Roger really had all that stuff. It seemed like he just fell into it. They have an informant, Ario, and The informant, I think, is a cool position because it makes sense where if you're like on top of the world, you need information constantly coming in. That's one of the reasons why Big Mom was so prominent in the world, is because she had lots of informants. She had information coming in from every corner of the world. They even have an intelligence officer with Spencer. And again, it seems like we're rounding out a lot of like intelligence and information gathering. But when you think about it, it doesn't seem like they were super prominent. So like he had them, they existed, but I think the information essentially that Roger needed for a lot of his journey was just information that wasn't readily available for anyone that was looking for it. You had to dig, you had to scour, which might be why, even though he has this many different intelligence officers on the crew, they weren't very prominent. You have the gunner, or I'm guessing the sharpshooter, Peter Moo. He even has a musician in Jackson Banner. So we got our Brooke, and then we have a shipwright, Blue Marine. So we've got some pretty similar roles to like how Luffy's crew is set up. Like I said, a lot of intelligence officers, a lot of information gathering, which I think all really runs through Robin for our crew. So, but one of the things that people were pointing out was that Roger doesn't have a cook. And I wouldn't say that's super important, but there are a lot of different crews where the cook is pointed out. Roger specifically does not have one, which is also sparking debate because it's like, okay, so where does Sanji fit in all this? And I was saying for like the other characters here, some of these roles are kind of balled into one where it's like, okay, you have 3 different intelligence officers. We have Robin, who's our probably intelligence officer. So like, just because the roles aren't painted in black and white to mirror Luffy's crew doesn't mean that, the crew doesn't have the roles. Obviously, Sanji's an important role to the crew, and him simply not being reflected in Roger's crew doesn't make him any less important. But like I said, I'm here to see how the agenda flips that. Next up, we're getting some Rocks lore, and it's going back to Thriller Bark again, where we saw John. Basically, Moria has the body of Gil Bastar, who is another character from the Rocks crew. And Oda kind of points out that, like, yes, he is a Rocks pirate, but he's not super important. You don't have to worry about it. But one thing I pull from this is that Moria has multiple members of the Rocks pirates' bodies. If they died anywhere like major, that means Moria had to go there and get their bodies. And I don't think we have like John and or Gil dying at God Valley, but if some of the Rocks pirates died at God Valley and Moria went and got those bodies, that would be a big up to Moria. Now, of course, God Valley is not on the map anymore. I don't think he'd be able to navigate to that if it still actually exists. It hasn't been blown off the map. But the fact that Moria is kind of like collecting these bodies of just world-renowned pirates, I mean, that kind of gives him some ups. Like, if he could actually properly utilize these bodies, that would be insane. And then we move to some Elbaf questions. The first one being, what is Elbaf modeled after? And obviously, like, Elbaf has like a Viking theme to it, like the culture, the aesthetic is very Norse, and it's kind of based off of Scandinavia, so Northern Europe. And Oda said that it took quite a long time to kind of model that, but you can kind of see the thematic appearance of it. And I mean, we kind of figure that's where Elbaf kind of comes from. We understand the culture of Elbaf, understood for a long time, so it's not surprising that this is the model for it. Next, we talk about the Dosundata tribe. So that is a tribe that Gabon mentioned as far as like the different types of races that have interacted and essentially procreated with one another. And the question is it a mixed race between giants and dwarves or ancient giants and dwarves? And Oda says that it's a mixed race between humans and dwarves. So, you have the basic dwarves, which are the Tontata. And Oda's basically saying, like, if you raise the volume a bit more of the footsteps of the Tontata, which is how they get their name, you get Dosundata. So that's kind of how the naming scheme works. And then he also says that the mixed race between a giant and a dwarf is called the Zushin Dodo, which I imagine is just another play on like footsteps, or just really loud footsteps. But he also says they're very rare. I wonder if we'd actually see one, because that would be really cool. I mean, I think Big Mom has dwarves in her family. if I recall. And then we get a question about the new giant pirates. Basically, we want to see what Goldberg and Gerd looked like when they were young. And so Oda gives us a breakdown on everybody. So we got Heidrun, we know he's the captain. He's 81 years old. And of course, these are giant ages. So 81 is not that old in giant years. We have Stanson, also 81, and the shipwright. We have Rode, the navigator. Rode is only 63, so a bit younger. Gerd, who's the doctor, is 75, so she's like right between Heidrun and Stanson and then Rode. And Goldberg, who is the cook, is also 63. So Rode and Goldberg are the youngest of the crew, with Heidrun and Stanson being the oldest, Gerd being right in the middle. And then we also get an image of all of them as kids. And I believe we've already seen Heidrun, Stanson, and Gerd, I think through Big Mom's backstory. That's where we see them as kids. And because of the ages, Goldberg and Rode were a bit younger, so they wouldn't have appeared then. So they needed new images. We get the whole layout of what they all look like, but I believe, like I said, we've already seen 3 of them so far. But cool information nonetheless. And then we get one of the more interesting questions. What are the Giants' cup sizes? And the answer we end on is World Cup, because they're so giant. And in typical Oda fashion, you know he's going to sneak these questions in there because why not? They're never all going to be serious, and there's always going to be at least 1 or 2 of these types of questions in there. That's just how it rolls. That wraps up the SBS discussion. Like I said, there's probably a few more. I don't think they're super important. There's a lot of the intro and exit questions that I usually skip because it's kind of just random nonsense. Or it's more stuff like that last question where I don't really need to cover it. So let's talk about One Piece 1134, the latest episode. But One Piece 1134 was another solid episode. We dive a bit more into how basically Kuma's going through the process of becoming a pacifista, or at least a human weapon at this point. The agreement between him, Vegapunk, and Saturn to where essentially we're going to get Bonnie cured, but it's going to cost Kuma his life. And the key scene I was looking for was there's the scene where Kuma like gracefully accepts the deal as long as he gets to save Bonnie. I think they did that absolutely beautifully. They also did the scene where Kuma is saying goodbye to Bonnie, basically like leaving her, seeing her for the last time, where she doesn't realize it, he does, and he's petting her on the head and giving her a head pat, and it lingers.
Oh, the humanity!
And like he's like petting her on the head, and it just slows down, and he kind of just leaves his hand there for a little bit, and then he walks away. And it's done so well. Like stuff like that is just, it's something that the anime can convey that the manga can't really do as well. Because, you know, what is it? It can be a bunch of still images of his hand on her head. Nah, you gotta have some motion to it. You gotta see like the linger. You gotta see the emotion in it. And I think that was done just so well. And it lines it up for the next episode where we're going to the Goa Kingdom. Basically, we're gonna hit the final mark on the Kuma flashback, I believe, in the next episode. Because this is gonna be where we see Kuma watch Luffy grow over time. And I think we should get to the end point where he actually gets the mind wipe. So I think after 1135, 1136 is going to be the return to Egghead. And I'm super excited for that. I do plan to have the 1135 as a main reaction on the main channel, so keep an eye out for that. And just a little bit more news before we step out. I don't know if you saw Megan Thee Stallion as Luffy, or at least as doing One Piece cosplay. Be sure to check that out. It's always awesome to see just One Piece reaching different levels of like cultural importance, or it's like you have characters just showing up anywhere. If you don't already know, Meg is a big manga and anime fan. She's been cosplaying different kinds of characters for a while now. It's so much more mainstream now. You see a lot of celebrities basically indulging in it. So that's really cool. I love to see One Piece in just different forms of media, this being one of the cool ones. And last but not least, something very near and dear to my heart. The Dangers in my heart is getting a theatrical movie. Yes, you heard it here. Peak is coming to theaters. I'm so excited. If you don't know, I love this show so much. I love this anime so much. So any news about it going anywhere, you know I'm going to be on it. I'm definitely seeing this movie. If it's in theaters near me, you know I'm going to see it immediately. first day, release day, I'm there. In Japan, it's coming out February 13th, so like Valentine's Day. I don't know when the release is going to be for the United States or like North America, but best believe I will be keeping an eye on that, and I'm going to announce it when they let me know. Also, on July 4th, I believe, we get the drop of the newest One Piece volume. Be sure to go grab that because that's the one with Kuma on the cover, and you know we gotta have that in store. We gotta have the physical on that one. But that's gonna do it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.